Please pray with me. Dear God, you know how insufficient I am. I cannot do this without you. And so I ask that you come into this place and give me the words to speak. If I've written down anything that's actually worth listening to, God, I just ask that you come into this place and open their ears to hear you. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts together, Lord, may that be acceptable in your sight. For you are our rock and our Redeemer, the reason we are here. Amen. What is the difference between wrestling someone and fighting? As a father, one of my absolute favorite things to do is to wrestle with my little boy. It's kind of the closest you can get to your kids physically, is to wrestle with them on the living room floor. And there's something just magnetic about Dad laying on the floor, isn't there? I don't know what it is. I'll be on the other side of the house, nowhere near him. But if I lay down on the carpet, he comes running full speed and just like jumps on me, body slams me. Now, let's be clear, he's not even 2 yet, so his body slam is pretty pathetic at this point. It's like getting hit with a big pillow or an oversized cat or something. It's not real intimidating. And so, and it's getting to a point where he loves to wrestle me and jump on me, but we're having to teach him the difference between mommy and daddy. Right? Because he likes to do it to Sarah too, but see, mommy's tummy is precious cargo. And daddy's is not. It's like actual baby, food baby. It's different. But why do we do that? Why do we wrestle with our kids? Why do we enjoy something that seems so violent when you're on the outside, when you're watching it happen? You're like, oh my gosh, stop it, you're gonna hurt. And I know half the women in the room are like, I have no idea why he does that. Gets them all riled up right before dinner. I can hear my mom in the back of my head. It's all fun and games until someone gets hurt. That's just, we have some others in there. So why do we do this? Why do we wrestle? Out in the wild, I've been watching some Planet Earth lately. That documentary, it's just gorgeous stuff, and I was watching that, and in the wild, baby animals will wrestle to learn how to fight, so to grow and get the skills that they need to handle the world, like baby lion cubs or baby bears, and they'll wrestle with their parents. And did you know this? That the adult lions and adult bears will pretend to be wounded to encourage their kids. It's awesome. You watch these fully grown lions on the ground, and the little lion comes around them. And it's awesome that they do this for their kids. So what is the difference between wrestling someone and fighting? Today is the fourth and final sermon in our series, State of the Union, where we have taken 1 month to look at the connection between politics and piety, the connection between religion and government. It's been a tricky topic. This month has been kind of intense. And a lot of people say, ooh, don't talk about politics. Don't talk about politics in your church. That's too touchy. That's too big of an issue. It's too much of a hot topic in our culture today. But I've always thought if it's a hot topic out there, then we've got to talk about it in here. And so we have talked about Democrats and Republicans, and how as Christians we need to rise above what divides us and follow the example of Jesus. And then we talked about the law versus morality, and we talked about how when they change a law, that doesn't change God's heart. And when we change and we push someone to a law, that's not going to change people's heart. Only Jesus can change people's heart. And then, again, we get this idea of rising above the limits of our government. And then last week we talked about freedom of religion and all the problems that creates. And again, Jesus shows us how to rise above the divided world to focus on seeking and saving people rather than condemning them. Do you get this theme throughout this whole series of rising above the limits of our government? The world seeks to divide us and then pit us against one another, but Jesus consistently pushes us to rise above, to be better than the example of the broken world. We have differences. I'm not trying to minimize that, especially in politics. But Jesus teaches us how to overcome those differences in a godly way, in the way He taught us. And so today, all of those pieces come together. Political parties, legislation, freedom of religion, and all of it comes to a head in the most difficult concepts in politics and in our personal lives. Today, I want to talk about compromise. Compromise? No, never. I will never budge 1 inch on any issue ever. I would rather burn the house down. I know there are some people who blanched when they hear the word compromise. Literally, some of us would rather burn the house down. What is the difference between wrestling and fighting? And so, to get a little insight on this issue, we're going to examine one of the strangest stories in the Old Testament, and that's saying something. And we're in chapter 32 of Genesis, centered around the character of Jacob. Now, right before our scripture lesson, in the first half of that chapter, we're given a little bit of context. You see, this guy Jacob, he's the younger brother of a man named Esau. They're twins, but Esau came out first, so he's the oldest. So he's the one who gets the birthright. But Jacob wants the birthright. Esau's the one who gets all the stuff inherited from his dad Isaac, who's Abraham's kid. Do you kind of remember that story, right? Esau is this big and burly guy, right? And he's a hunter, and he's strong, and he's hairy. And Jacob is what we call indoorsy. Remember, he's not the hunter. He's just not like that. And but Jacob wants that birthright. And so basically, Jacob swindles his brother and tricks his dad into giving him the birthright instead. And then after he does this, Esau responds by threatening to kill Jacob. He's furious that he's been tricked out of his birthright. And so he threatens to kill Jacob, and Jacob runs away from home, terrified of his brother's wrath. Now that's another story for another day. We've done separate sermons on that. But that is where we are at the beginning of the chapter. Esau and Jacob hate each other because of something that happened a long time ago. But now Esau is coming back. We don't know why. Jacob gets word that Esau is coming, and he's got 400 guys with him. And in verse 7, before our scripture lesson, verse 7, it says, "In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into 2 groups, and the flocks and the herds and the camels as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left might escape." So this is Jacob's grand plan to get away from Esau, right? Remember, he's moved on with his life. He got married, he's got lots of stuff, but Esau is coming, and Jacob is terrified. He hurt his brother by tricking him, by stealing from him, kind of. You know, he sort of stole from his brother, and he thinks that Esau's coming to kill him. So Jacob's grand plan is, here's what I'll do. I'll split all my stuff into 2 groups, and if Esau attacks one group and kills all those people, at least I'll get away with half my stuff. He's not a fighter, this Jacob. Indoors. Okay? And then, following that, he sets up these big gifts to give to his brother, right? He's got over 500 animals that he's going to give to Esau as a gift, and he sets them up in 2 waves. He gives a bunch of them to one servant, and he says, "Go, give this to my brother Esau, and make sure you tell him it's from Jacob." And then he takes another servant, he says, "Here's the rest of the animals. Go to Esau, give it to Esau, and make sure you tell him it's from Jacob." And verse 20, right before our scripture lesson, it says, "For he thought, I will pacify him with these gifts that I am sending on ahead, and later, when I see him, perhaps he will receive me." Read that. "I will send this gift on to pacify him, so later he won't kill me." Right? That's what we're afraid of. I'll send him these gifts, and maybe he won't kill me. But then the story pauses. It's very strange. Our scripture lesson is like a mini story in the middle of the Jacob and Esau feud. The story stops for a little bit for our scripture lesson. And so Jacob is he's down at this river, and he's traveling with his family. And he's down at the river, and first he sends his family across the river. He's got the 2 wives and his servants and his 12 sons, and he sends them across the river. Then he sends all his stuff across the river, right? He sends all his stuff. So Jacob is alone on the one side of the river, and it's starting to get dark. It's nighttime. And it says in verse 24, "So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak." Now, I just want to point out how weird that sentence is. Okay, so some guy just shows up and attacks Jacob. And they just start wrestling. They just start fighting in the darkness. Now, we find out later that that man represents God. That guy is supposed to be God with skin on. You know, it's God in a human form. Maybe it's an angel. We don't really know what that was. But whatever, it represents God. But remember the bigger story. The family feud between Jacob and Esau. Okay, imagine you're Jacob. You're hanging out by yourself on one side of the river. Your murderous brother is coming towards you. And suddenly some guy attacks you. If I'm Jacob, what are you thinking? Esau's here! And I don't have any gifts for him. I don't have anything to give him. I'm all by myself. I have nothing for my brother. And so Jacob, the non-fighter, is going to have to give it all his all, for he knows that he is fighting for his life. But it's not Esau. It's okay. It's some random guy. Actually, it's God. Which honestly makes this verse even stranger. It's not some random guy. It's not his brother. It's God who attacks Jacob. God attacks Jacob. This is the only story in the Old Testament that I could come up with where God physically shows up and attacks one of his own people. And they wrestle like that all night, and then it's almost done. In verse 25, and it says, then the man spoke, when the man saw that he could not overpower him, couldn't overpower Jacob, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he was wrestling the man. And then the man said, let me go, for it is almost daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go until you bless me. That thing that brothers do, where they like twist the arm behind the back and they say uncle, say uncle. Right? You're familiar with this? This is the weirdest uncle I have ever seen. Right? He pins the guy down and says, I won't let you go until you bless me. So some guy attacks you in the dark, and you win. You wrestle him and you get him, but you're going to pin him down until he blesses you. And so in verse 27, it says, the man asked him, what is your name? Jacob, he answered. And the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans, and you have overcome. Now that's significant on a couple of different levels. First, remember that Jacob had 12 sons, right? He's got 12 boys in his family, and Jacob gets his name changed to Israel. And so those boys become the 12 sons of Israel. And then when they all have families, it becomes the 12 tribes of Israel. And then eventually that turns into the nation of Israel. We're witnessing the birth of a nation right here, when God tells one man, I'm going to change your name to Israel. The second big thing I want to point out, did you know that the word Israel means something like struggles with God? I didn't know that. It's just, I'm reading this and it says, and not only that, but that is the name that God decided to give to his chosen people. He says, you're my chosen people. You're my favorite family. I'm going to bless you and watch over you, and I'm going to bless the entire world through you, and I'm going to call you struggles with me. They really are his children. I'm going to call you struggles with me. The very name of God's chosen people, the name that God gives to his chosen people, reminds us that in life we will struggle with God. Verse 30 finishes the story. And it says, so Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, it is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. And the sun rose up over him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. And so Jacob, he wins the little wrestling match, but he also loses, right? I mean, he wins because he got the blessing, right? He saw the face of God, you know, sort of, in the darkness, in the river, whatever this person was. He saw the face of God, but he walked away a changed man. He was a completely different person. He's got a new name. He's got this limp, possibly a lifelong scar from his interaction with God. And that's it. That's the end of our little story of Jacob wrestling with God. And it's very strange, but before we move on, we really should hear the rest of the Jacob and Esau story, right? We've got to find out what happens to these guys. So, quick recap. Jacob stole the birthright from Esau. Esau threatens Jacob, says, I'm going to kill you. Jacob runs away from home. Years go by. Jacob's married. Jacob's moved on. But now Esau is coming. Esau is coming with 400 men. Jacob takes a little break to wrestle with God, and then the showdown begins. The very next line, chapter 33, the first verse, it says, Jacob looked up, and there was Esau coming with his 400 men. And so he divided the children, remember his plan, he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the 2 female servants. And he put the female servants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. Then he himself went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. And verse 4, here it is. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and he kissed him, and they wept. It's okay. They don't kill each other. This could have gone a different way, but they don't kill each other. Instead, there's this unexpected, beautiful picture of redemption, of reconciliation, of brothers hugging it out after years of hating each other. But I want to show you something really cool that I found this past week. Back in chapter 32, verse 30, he named that place Peniel because he saw the face of God. He saw God face to face. That's what he said in verse 30. Then in chapter 33, when he's talking to Esau, right, they're starting to catch up, they're reconciling, they're having this good time. In chapter 33, verse 10, it says, "No, please, said Jacob, if I have found favor in your eyes, accept this gift from me, for to see your face is like seeing the face of God, now that you have received me favorably." You understand what he just did, right? He's talking to his brother. They have reconciled after years. And he says, this is like seeing the face of God. And I would know I did that last night. Right? You understand? He takes this moment. Now, there's another part in the Bible that says that nobody has ever seen the face of God. And that's true. Jacob saw something, but it was dark. Right? He's down by the river, and we're not sure what he saw, but he saw something in the dark before daybreak. But in this moment of brotherly healing, he compares that moment of healing to literally seeing the face of God. And he's the foremost authority. And what that shows is that there must be some kind of connection to wrestling with God and wrestling with the world. The good news that I found today is that God wrestles with us. Maybe not physically like he did with Jacob, but in our hearts, sometimes we have this wrestling match with God. And think about the pieces of it. God initiated the fight. There was no argument or conversation, no rationale given. Just a man shows up and starts wrestling. God initiates the wrestling, which tells me that God enjoys the engagement. And then I think about when I wrestle my son, and how I love, rolling around and just wrestling with the little guy. And I think I could go so far as to say that God enjoys wrestling with us. God likes wrestling with us. He likes working His good work in our broken hearts. God is not angry when we wrestle with Him. He started it. He starts it. Because sometimes to come to grips with the truth in our lives, we need to wrestle with it. But why? Why does God wrestle with us? Well, look at the story closely. It's buried in the middle of the Jacob and Esau feud. Jacob is getting ready to fight Esau. He's getting ready to confront his brother. And that is the moment that God decided to step in and wrestle with Jacob. And then Jacob fights with God and he pins God down. Now think about that sentence for a second. Jacob pinned God down. Jacob, indoorsy. Right? This is not a fighter. This is not a strong man. So he pinned God down. God is God. God is the all-powerful creator of the entire universe and way stronger than Jacob. It would be like me saying that Liam pinned me down. Yeah, it doesn't work. And then I was thinking about it and I realized, remember the lion cubs and the bear cubs who wrestle with their parents? And I mentioned that sometimes the parents will pretend to be wounded to encourage their children. Maybe God was pretending to be wounded, pretending to be weaker than he is, to encourage Jacob. And so what did Jacob say? He said, he pins God down. And he demands, I will not let you go until you bless me. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Jacob already has the birthright. That's what started this whole thing. He already has God's blessing. And so he pins God down and he says, I won't let you go until you bless me. And I think in that moment, God spoke to Jacob's heart to show him that what he really wanted, what Jacob really needed in that moment was not God's blessing, but Esau's blessing. What he desperately needed was connection with his brother. What he wanted was to see the face of God. Not in the dark down by the river. No, he wanted to see the face of God on his brother in broad daylight. Do you see how cool that is? God, and so what we realize is that God prepares us by wrestling with us. That's why God wrestles with us, to prepare us. God knew that Jacob needed to come to that realization before he met with Esau, to realize he needed that connection to his brother. He needed the proper motivation, the proper inspiration before the showdown began. God wrestles with us to prepare us to wrestle with the world. So what is the difference between wrestling and fighting? Between brothers, between lion cubs, between bear cubs, between God and man, wrestling is preparation. Wrestling, the goal of wrestling is to learn, to grow, to get better at something. The goal of fighting is destruction, and harm, and pain, and death, and evil. And then we can take that even one more step. Even if we want to fight, if we start with fighting, maybe we are angry with God for something, right? Maybe we hate God. We want to fight God and hurt God and attack God for whatever reason. For whatever's going on in our lives, maybe we want to attack God. God is so big and so great and so strong and so glorious that he takes our fighting and turns it into wrestling. God takes our hurtful motivation. We want to hurt God. And he transforms it into wrestling where we learn something. He can use it to teach us, like an angry child screaming at his parents. You know, like punching dad's chest or punching mom's leg or saying, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. I don't hate you. I need you. And I love you, but I'm angry. I'm upset, and I don't know how to express it, so I hate you. God wrestles with us to prepare us. God wrestles with us even when we want to fight. And so the application is that we should engage with God before and then take that to the world. In every issue, in every topic, in every fight, wrestle with God and walk away changed, and then you will be ready to wrestle with your brother. You will realize that what you really need here on earth, you'll find out when you get it from God first. Wrestle with God. You will recognize the face of God in your brother who hates you when you wrestle with God first. You find it first in your time wrestling with God. Wrestle with God and then take that to the world. How many of you in your prayer time with God always say happy things? God, I'm just so thankful that my life is going exactly the way I want it to, and the timing is perfect, and I got no complaints, and I'm just really happy about my relationship with my family and my work, and I've got nothing to complain about ever. Oh, come on, God, I'm mad, I'm upset, I can't stand the way this is going, I don't understand. I don't like your timing, I don't like the way things are with my family, I don't like the way things are at work, I'm angry and I'm upset. Wrestle with your God, because he is ready. He's hoping that you'll engage with him. All right, so what does this have to do with politics? You can probably get there on your own, but let's walk with me through this. Let's make up some fictional brothers. Let's call them, well, I don't know, I'll just make up something off the tip of my head, Mr. Democrat and Mr. Republican. Brothers, living in the same home, torn apart because of something they did a long time ago. And they spend a lot of time hating each other, and hunting and attacking and hurting and fearing the other one. And they spend so much time hating each other that fear grows. And they start to forget that they have any common ground. They start to think that there is no way that they can ever come together. Or you know what? Forget politics for a second. Maybe there's someone in your life. someone that you are torn apart from. Maybe it's your husband. Maybe it's your wife, your kids, your grandkids, your coworker, your boss, your high school best friend. Torn apart because someone did something wrong. They did something wrong and it was unfair, and you don't know how you can ever come back together. And you spend so much time apart. Even if you live in the same house, you spend so much time apart that you lose sight of any common ground, and you are convinced that you will spend forever opposed to one another. And don't get me wrong, you tried to work it out. You tried to sit down and hold hands and sing Kumbaya and pretend that everything was great. But it didn't work. Think about the example of Jacob and Esau, right? God could have grabbed them by the scruff of their neck and pulled them and sat them down at the table and made them hold hands and sing Kumbaya and pretend it was great. Do you think that would have worked in Esau's heart? Or do you think that would have gotten Jacob ready? No! God had to attack Jacob. They had to wrestle with him, show him what he really needed. He had to change Jacob's heart before progress could happen. So if you're struggling to move forward, maybe what you need is not to fight with that person. Maybe what you need is not to fight the Democrats or fight the Republicans. Maybe you need to wrestle with God. You need to spend some time dealing with this first. Spend some time with God. Wrestle with God, and then wrestle the world, because that prepares us. That teaches us the proper method and the best way to move forward. We grow and we learn when we wrestle with our God. Both of our political parties have forgotten the face of God. And it's no wonder that they can't find the face of God in their brother. Right? I think maybe the Republicans need to go down to the river and get thrown around by God a little bit. And then I think the Democrats need to wait in line. We need to wrestle with God. Look, I'm not naive. All right? I don't believe that my little sermon series on politics is suddenly going to get these big, giant political parties to start holding hands and pretending to be nice to each other. I'm not thinking we're going to have a Jacob and Esau hug fest anytime soon. But change has to start somewhere, right? And maybe, if this one little church in the middle of the UP could start figuring out how to do this politics thing better, maybe you and I could start the change. Because I believe with all of my heart that in our personal lives and in our politics and in the entire world, we cannot move forward without God. We cannot move forward until we have dealt with God first. We will be trapped in this eternal struggle, getting nowhere until we start taking notes from God on how to interact, how to engage, how to learn, how to love each other. In everything you do, in every struggle you are going through, take it to God first. And then wrestle your brother, wrestle your sister, wrestle with God, and you will be prepared as a man of God, as a woman of God, to deal with anything the world throws at you. Wrestle. Don't fight. Wrestle. And a solution is possible. The state of our union is in jeopardy. The state of our union needs to spend some time wrestling with God. They say don't talk about politics in church. I mentioned that at the beginning. It's too difficult, it's too touchy. But if we don't talk about this stuff here, how can we possibly be expected to engage in it out there? From political parties to legislation, to freedom of religion, to the terrifying idea of compromise. I am so glad that we have a God who will wrestle with us to help us, prepare us for all of that nonsense out there. The State of the Union, the real one, is an annual speech given by the President of the United States of America. It's on Tuesday. What a coincidence. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to put your arm around your brother Republican and your sister Democrat and together face the problems of the world? Are you ready to push people to Jesus and not to this law or that rule? Are you ready to remember that our goal is to seek and to save the lost and not just to condemn them? Are you ready to wrestle with your God so that we can be ready to wrestle with the world? Amen.